Good morning, friends. In today's video, I'm going to be doing something that is, in fact, something I've done before, but never for the series of videos that I am doing it on. We are actually going to be hearing a story from Luciano the Jumper's time in generic Werewolf. This is something that I'm very excited to do, and it is something that is actually going to be introducing a concept that I have talked about over on the Jump Chain subreddit. The concept of creative mode tokens, which are little baby bits of access to creative mode, where rather than following creative mode rules for an entire chain, we are only going to be allowing creative mode for a single supplement or jump, although in this case, we are going to be using it for a supplement. That said, I'm so excited to be doing this. This is going to be becoming public over on Tuesdays, and it is a video series that I plan on doing regularly. A series of videos where I talk about a story from Luciano the Jumper's Chain. I might be doing this for jumps that we have done in the past, and if so, those videos will be going public when they are published, as opposed to becoming videos that are released on Tuesdays regularly. But moving forward, I would like to release one of these videos every Tuesday for Luciano the Jumper's Chain, so that way we can actually get to experience a little bit more of what happens in each jump in the chain, rather than simply hearing about the build, learning about some of the activities that go on in it, at the end of a video for perhaps 2 or 3 minutes and then moving on. That said, it's also worth noting that I do not know how long this video is going to be, at least not at the time that I am filming this part of the video. So my hope is that this video won't be incredibly long, but will also be entertaining enough that people are excited for more videos in these series, and also so that people are more excited to get to see bits and pieces of Luciano's personality that were previously not visible in past videos. That said, I'm so excited. Let's go ahead and jump into the story. Our story begins atop a penthouse suite overlooking a gigantic metropolitan landscape. In the penthouse suite, there are two figures, though only one is still alive. One of them is a snarling, silver-furred werewolf with blazing scarlet eyes. The creature stands triumphant over the body of a rather corpulent man. The body has been almost completely dismembered, and blood covers and stains the werewolf. The werewolf looks at the body and is quiet for several moments before turning his back on the body and walking away. He doesn't leave the penthouse suite, as he understands that what he has just done allows him to follow the rules of the laws of the jungle, and this means that he is able to claim that which was once owned by his fallen foe. His fallen foe is the very last of a set of triplets that have ruled the criminal underworld of much of this entire planet for most of their adult lives. And the werewolf, standing in victory over the figure, has claimed the empire that was once belonging to the figure who was the oldest of the triplets and the largest of the men, known as the Three Pigs. The Three Pigs are grotesque criminals, criminals who traded in every single excess and who committed almost every sort of crime imaginable. At the very beginning of a journey that began almost 2 years ago, these figures pissed off the werewolf, and the werewolf decided that he would both liberate this world from their foul grasp and also claim that which was theirs and use it for better ends than they have used it. This marks the completion of a journey, And in this moment, as the werewolf is standing and studying that which is now his, as he begins to feel the power and authority surge into him, he begins to smile. His werewolf face is rather handsome, although in this particular case, it's also quite macabre, since it is covered in blood and other foul liquids. Nothing unholy, but certainly nothing that would be associated with a good and wholesome figure. At the moment, he begins to study the scene, and he begins to think about what comes next. The figure senses a ripple in the air behind him, and when they turn around, they see that they are no longer the sole living inhabitant of the room. A rather strange fellow is looking at them, and even though there is no mouth or even face on the figure behind them, they can sense the figure's elation. For several drawn-out moments, neither figure speaks, and then the faceless man steps forward and offers a hand to the werewolf. There is a moment where the body language of the figure with no face completely shifts, going from that of an elated, almost euphoric, giddy teenager to one of consummate, cold professionalism. The werewolf, unconsciously recognizing the true identity of the stranger, takes the hand and shakes it, and the figure does not smile, but begins to retake on some of that previous euphoric giddiness before they begin to speak. Oh man, oh man, oh man, what a victory! The fans are going crazy, my lad. I cannot believe how exciting it was to finally watch you take an active role, to finally watch you be proactive. You went out of your way to dismantle this criminal enterprise, but you did so in such a way that you left it just operable for your own needs. It has been truly wonderful watching you take on a bigger role these last 2 years. I cannot tell you how many people watching from home are just out of their minds with excitement, wondering what it is that you'll do next. Because this marks one of the first times in which you were truly active of your own volition, the good people back at home decided to reward you. And in fact, the executives watching the program have been so delighted by what they've seen that they decided to give me authorization to give you a very special tool. This, and the figure reaches into a pocket and takes out a golden shimmering coin, is what we in the business like to call a creative token. A creative token is a special device. When you are ready, you can use this on any jump or any supplement that you would like to use it on, and you can gain that, whatever it is, as long as it's not a gauntlet, at full power. That means that you do not have to worry about point limits for the purposes of whatever it is that you are deciding to invest it in. But this is an extremely rare item. This may very well be the only one you get in your whole chain, although, if you decide to continue to impress and entertain the good people watching at home, who knows? Maybe we will give you another one. That said, this is bound to you, and it will not be used until you are ready for it to be used. You may not even go the next jump or even the next 3 jumps without using it, as this is something that only comes into play when you want it to. You are the head alpha in charge, and we are so excited to see what you do next. We are unbelievably proud of you, Luciano, and we cannot wait to see what sort of things you will do in the future to entertain us. Do you have time for some questions? The werewolf takes the coin and smirks at the announcer-like creature in front of it. And then they nod. And the figure this time does smile. A mouth morphs into place on its otherwise featureless head. And it says, "Excellent. All right. Do you mind telling the good people at home what plans you have for your new enterprise?" The werewolf is silent for a second as it considers how to respond, and then it begins to speak. It begins to talk about how now it is ready to begin to take on more responsibilities. It is ready to begin to become a more important figure in the landscapes of where it is going to be going. And this enterprise that it has now acquired through the laws of the jungle is just one way that it is going to do that. The creature announces that they have plans to reform the business empire and to make it into a powerful, legitimate enterprise. And it will be keeping any and all criminal elements either done for the sake of righteousness or keeping them to a minimum. The creature explains that they may well have plans in the future to create a private fighting force that is equipped and trained in combat arts that utilize holiness and that utilize purity as weapons against people, who live in the shadows, and as weapons against creatures that seek to prey on the innocent. The creature explains that now they know that the world, and indeed many worlds in the future, are going to be larger and more supernatural than previous Earths that it has visited, such as Generic Fist. It recalls that decades ago, the decade it spent in that world was one where it was unbothered by the supernatural, because the supernatural was quite literally non-existent. But now it knows that not only do mythical creatures exist in some worlds, but they have power. It has already encountered and begun to clash with other alphas. And in other places, it has even brought low entire werewolf clans that worked for the Three Pigs. The alpha is so powerful that it has been able to withstand the attentions of even small families of werewolves up until this point, even fighting them simultaneously. It has grown stronger on the blood of its foes, and it plans to become an even more powerful enemy to those who live in the darkness and to those who seek to cause pain and suffering for the sake of acquiring new things and for the sake of acquiring expanded wealth. This excites the announcer. And the announcer begins to ask them more questions, such as, do you plan to go to Generic Vampire, another world where it is that creatures dwell in the darkness, or maybe even Generic Narconovella, where the enemies are all too human, but are still incredibly powerful and incredibly corrupt. And the werewolf simply smiles and says, yes. Yes, I do. As the creature envisions itself growing stronger by defeating such unique enemies, and as it imagines gaining perks in such places that it can use to defeat those who hide in the dark, and those who would grow stronger at the expense of other people. This causes the announcer to smile frantically. For the next few minutes, more and more questions are asked, and the werewolf is a gracious interviewee and is eager to inform the good people at home who are watching the program that the werewolf is a part of all about its future intentions. It is revealed that the creature is beginning to think more highly of both themselves and also their own abilities. They have now used their powers for combat, not for the first time, not even for the 100th time, but they've used their powers to creatively and effectively dismantle an entire criminal empire. They fought in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, in the streets of North America, and places like Detroit and Chicago and Los Angeles. They worked with other creatures who are determined to dwell in the light, and they saved families from the machinations of the empire. This was one of the first times that the creature was an active and determined and persistent force for good. And the creature enjoyed the feelings that came with that. They delighted in rescuing people, and they want to do it more often. Eventually, the strange announcer-like patron being smiles at the werewolf one last time and says that they will now let them go, and then vanishes. And the werewolf is left alone with the coin. The werewolf decides to call a maid service to have them come and clean up the mess that has been left behind. And this is quite simple to do, as the penthouse suite is filled with information that the werewolf is able to use to begin to organize their understanding of the full details and depth of the criminal enterprise that they have just overtaken. This rather hostile takeover has been thorough, and in hours the werewolf understands nearly everything that they will need to understand to both know how to dismantle the criminal elements of this empire and also to begin to take charge. They contact people on the boards of directors of countless businesses, and they announce that they are the new successor and the new president of the organization, as well as its next executive. And people quietly and reluctantly accept this, as they understand that the reason the beast is able to contact them is because it has successfully disemboweled the last of the three pigs. Some individuals knew that there was a monster that was hunting down the three pigs. They learned of it when the youngest brother was defeated and almost devoured by a strange, inhuman beast. They know now that when they talk to the mysterious, self-proclaimed president, they are dealing with this creature. And this creature does not hesitate to let them know that it knows where they live, and that information will be used against them if they are not eager to follow its commands. No one really resists, and in time, the business becomes completely the property of the new alpha. Over the course of the next few years, it becomes gradually apparent that there is a new and preeminent force in criminal politics. Mysterious werewolf hunters are routinely slain by a strange operative group consisting of men, women, and other people dressed in all black, whose bodies seem unnaturally light, almost silver-looking in the few cameras that manage to capture them. Unbeknownst to anyone, there is an elite strike force consisting of werewolves who've been turned and personally trained by Luciano the Jumper, who hunts down and slay entire squads of werewolf hunters. These powerful creatures are turned into Luciano the Jumper's particular type of werewolf, which is overwhelmingly strong. Creatures that can lift entire cars with ease, even lifting military-grade vehicles without that much effort. They are incredibly powerful, and they hit overwhelmingly hard. And they are only one of the relative newcomers on the scene. Other strange figures go around to orphanages and adopt children, and they raise them and they train them in how to be powerful elite operatives. They don't turn any of these children into soldiers as children, but they do give them preliminary military training. They teach them how to defend themselves and others, and they adopt them by the thousands. In some cases, entire orphanages are cleanly emptied by professional adopters who go out of their way to both give these children loving homes and also to educate them in all sorts of combat arts and combat styles. They turn these children into elite soldiers, and by the time the children are fully fledged adults, they are ready to enter a range of fields, and they are equipped with knowledge of how to protect people, as well as powerful motivations for doing so. They are considered employees of Luciano's Werewolf company, a business that he never fully renames, though they fully plan to rename them by the time they go to their next jump. Still, years pass, and this new force overtakes the criminal underworld by storm. Entire criminal families and clans are ruthlessly dismantled and are actively transformed. And throughout all of this time, Luciano the Jumper never utilizes the creative token that they have. Occasionally, they will simply summon it and look at it, wondering what to do with it. It is only mere days before they go to their next jump that they decide what they want to do. It turns out that some worlds are modern enough and are well equipped enough that they have their own jump chain communities, and this is a clever thing that allows Luciano to gradually grow in meta knowledge. This is not the first world that they have been to where this is the case. In both generic Fist and some portions of generic platformer, a world which in their case was actually modern fantasy as opposed to simply high or low fantasy. They have been able to learn about different franchises, and they've been able to learn about different places they could jump to, as well as powerful supplements. One supplement that they heard of that they were interested in, but they were never able to visit before now, is the bank supplement. And this is where they decide to invest their creative mode token. When they have made this choice, the token disappears and a screen appears in front of them, denoting what it is that the bank does. The bank is a place where they will be able to store new points that they did not use. This is not retroactive, but as a little bit of a thank you, the bank does come with a few grand worth of points right off the bat as a special way of encouraging investment in it, and as a way of encouraging the bank to actually be used, because the good people at home have noted that Luciano will sometimes make jumps a little bit more challenging for themselves and then will not actually use all of their points. However, this comes with a very important limitation. No more than 500 points can be taken out, at least for the next couple of jumps, in any one go. So, drawbacks and limitations will still be important, but they will not be quite as necessary as they were before. However, in exchange for that, Luciano will still be required to take on at least one drawback as a way of making things more interesting. That said, this has never been something that Luciano has not done, aside from in one or two particular cases. So Luciano is more than ready to accept that these are the terms and conditions of their particular access to the bank. As they begin to study, they begin to create a very powerful bank. They are excited to begin to put points into it and to take points out. The bank is a supplement by Shadow of Blue Rose that is normally impossible for someone to max out due to the 1,000 bank points that people will use to build their bank. Because of the creative mode token that Luciano has decided to invest into the supplements, this is no longer the case, and this is very important. Luciano will be doing a fully uncapped bank, and that is going to be something that is going to matter in the future, even though for the first few jumps, as in for the next few jumps that I have planned, that Luciano will have access to this, they will have strict limits, so that way they cannot use this to just purchase every single thing in a jump without being able to, without having to take drawbacks. So let's go ahead and understand the strict limitations that are going to apply for Luciano's version of the bank. And we'll do that after we go through and look at the actual build that Luciano is going to be using. So they are going to have no limits on deposits, which means that if they want to, they can insert an entire jump's worth of points into the bank. I cannot actually imagine Luciano ever doing this personally. That said, I'm not going to make it a hard and fast rule that it won't happen. It's just that Luciano, at this point in their development, would simply not do that. However, that is still an ability that they possess. It is still a thing they could do. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the interest rate. The interest rate is very important because even though normally the default is that there is no interest, so whatever number of points you put in versus whatever number of points you take out is your final results no matter how many jumps you go to. We are going to be taking the 20% interest option, which is something that I am extremely fond of. That means that if you go ahead and you put in 500 choice points, transforming them into banked choice points, you will be getting an additional 100 at the start of your next jump, and then that number will only increase from there because obviously 500 divided by 5 is 100. The final thing is the conversion rate. The conversion rate is one way. It only goes for converting choice points into banked choice points. That is extremely important for understanding because withdrawing banked choice points transforms them into regular choice points at a 1-to-1 ratio. So what this means is that if someone puts in 500 choice points into the bank, those 500 choice points become 1,000 banked choice points. That is extremely, extremely, extremely important for understanding. And then if someone were to take out those 1,000 banked choice points, those 1,000 banked choice points would become 1,000 regular choice points. Now, I don't know if at any point, unless we are going to a truly extreme jump, something like Medaka Box Abnormal or Germanic Norse mythology, I cannot actually imagine us taking out as many as 1,000 points at any one time, but there are certainly extremely high-powered jumps that I fully plan for us to visit where it is entirely possible that we will be withdrawing hilarious amounts of points for the sake of purchasing all the stuff. In that case, I can still assume that because I like for Luciano to face challenges, that we will still probably put in some pretty intense drawbacks. And what we will do then is I might well just put the points that I get from the drawbacks into the bank as a way to begin to rebuild after the damage that I'm going to be inflicting on the bank point fund that Luciano is going to gradually be accruing. It is worth noting that even though I'm going to say that we are going to start off the bank with, I will say, somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 banked choice points, we are actually, and these ones will not be subject to interest. The only points that will be subject to interest are ones that Luciano themselves actually put into the bank. So that way there is no incentive for Luciano to just go ahead and only leave these things here. I actually want for Luciano to use these points so that way they can begin to save up for some of the more grand jumps. As another example of a more grand jump that I can think of off the top of my head, Generic Cartoon World is a fantastically powerful jump, and I have plans for us to visit it at some point in the near-ish future. It's not going to be our next jump, I know that much for sure, but it is going to be a place that we visit probably before the end of the year, and I do have plans for this chain to continue for a while. I am also going to eventually create a character sheet where Luciano's perks are like outlined and detailed, and the information about their builds are actually available for people to peruse and look at. But now part of the reason I waited until this point to start looking at things like the bank is because I wanted Luciano to begin to accrue more power, and I also wanted to try and figure out a way for the bank to be uncapped, for it to be the maximum power thing possible. And then I remembered that I came up with a concept for creative tokens a while back over on the Jump Chain subreddit. And I was inspired to do this partially because some jumps are choice point sinks, which is a term that I could not quite remember that I also coined at some point in the past. Although, actually, I'm pretty sure I didn't coin the term choice point sinks. I did coin the concept of creative mode tokens, which are just you can do creative mode for one jump at most, and then you have to decide what you want to do with it. I thought that this would be the funnest way of introducing the bank, and this was one of the first jumps where Luciano had a considerable number of excess points. I decided not to try and change Luciano's build in this jump, but I decided that it would be a good idea to actually reward Luciano for changing up their behavior and for engaging in the setting in a way that felt satisfying. Luciano did not just go and hang out and only help people when it was necessary in this jump. Luciano went out of their way to be a proactive force for good. And of course, in doing so, they definitely caused a lot of destruction and mayhem, but those two things are not mutually exclusive. Sometimes you need to be a chaotic force and a chaotic active nature in order to change a setting for the better. There's lots of settings that are hellscapes, and that in order to make those particular places better, you need to be willing to be active and to change the status quo, which was something that Luciano did in this particular jump. Luciano's business in the future is going to be slowly but increasingly significant aspect of how it is that they interact with settings, because this is a business that follows them into the future, and they can make the sorts of changes that they want to make to it. Over the course of this jump, one of their big things is going to be dismantling the criminal elements, although not every single subtle element or every single hidden elements of the business is going to go away, just the parts that are criminal and that are actively dangerous. So Luciano, for example, will still be will be repurposing squads of warriors and potentially even hitmen over the course of this jump, where instead of neutralizing them and wiping them out of existence, they will be willing to use them for more utilitarian purposes. They might be willing to use them to dispose of genuinely evil people, such as serial killers and ruthless criminals who have been actively causing destruction and mayhem for truly selfish reasons, and also be willing to use them as a way to make sure that certain areas are kept clean from the influences of drugs and criminal enterprises that seek to step in where they perceive there to be a power vacuum. It's definitely interesting trying to watch and trying to plan out one of the first major personality shifts, which is not a personality like 180, but rather is a personality evolution for Luciano the Jumper, and watching them become a more distinct figure with power and influence that is all their own. I really enjoyed the story time, and while I won't use every story time to introduce brand new elements, I'm still excited that in this particular story time I was able to introduce us to the concept of creative mode tokens, which is something that in the past I have asked people over on the subreddit about, and I've asked them what they would use a creative mode token for. I got a lot of interesting answers. I remember that some of the answers I heard were things like Germanic and Norse mythology jump, which in order to truly be able to get the most out of, you would certainly need something like a creative mode token or even to be in creative or quest mode in the first place, because it is such a jump that is jam-packed with content that in order to truly maximize it, you would probably need more than a decade. You would probably need an extended stay drawback and something like quest mode, which I think is a perfectly viable and in fact powerful combination. I think that extended stay drawbacks do not stay drawbacks if you use them in quest mode. Another example that I got that I thought was very interesting was generic cartoon world. And generic cartoon world and Germanic/Norse mythology jump are two of my favorite jumps, and both of them are absolutely packed with powerful items, perks, and things to do. And I definitely understand why those two were some of the big ones, especially because generic cartoon world has access to perks like stunt doubles and mundane Mondays, which are two of the most powerful defensive perks that I think I've ever seen. The mundane Mondays is an absolute no sell perk when it comes to supernatural stuff. It's not a perfect defense, as some supernatural attacks are simply converted into others, and the perk by itself does not stop gravity. So if someone drops a bus on you from outer space, or if someone drops a bus on you from some place, say the height of the Empire State Building, that is still going to potentially hit you unless you move out of the way. But if they were using telekinesis to chuck it at you horizontally, then the telekinesis would stop the second it enters the range of mundane Mondays. And stunt doubles is also incredibly powerful. It lets you create 10 perfect clones that have all of your abilities aside from the ability to create more clones, which is a comically powerful perk. I very much enjoy it. It is one of my favorite cloning perks, and it's also something that I've front loaded into jumpers in the past as a way of allowing them to more easily tackle a more dangerous jump right out the gates, because going from, say, generic first jump over to a jump in Warhammer or Warhammer 40k is a surefire way of getting fucked up really fast. So sometimes front loading allows jumpers to visit more dangerous settings right away. Although a brave and clever jumper could go from their first jump to a setting like Warhammer, and with the right combination of meta knowledge and the right jump perks, be able to do a lot anyway, because in my opinion, the sign of a well-designed jump is that it is survivable with just in-jump materials. And now different people have different opinions on this, but that is my personal idea of what, that is one element of what it takes for something to be a well-designed jump. That said, in the future, I will definitely have videos where I talk about why I think this is the case. But for now, I'm just incredibly excited to be here, and I hope that you all enjoyed your first story time with Luciano, and also that we are going to be excited to look to the future together. As I mentioned before, for the first few jumps that Luciano has access to the bank, they will only be able to withdraw 500 points, which means that their starting budget will effectively be amplified, but even then there's no guarantee that they will take the additional 500. I don't believe in taking points recklessly and for no reason, and we will still be dealing with drawbacks. So while this is an important increase to Luciano's overall capabilities, this is not an absolute paradigm shift for our character. They're not going to go into their next jump and purchase every single thing that they can see, unless the jump is a relatively small jump, which those exist, but they are fairly rare, so we should not bank on that being what happens at our next jump. That said, I cannot wait to see you all in the next video, and I hope that you are having a truly wonderful morning.